Hello, everyone. We see so many friends in the chat. Fifth grade coming in strong. We have a number of schools out there from California, fourth grade from Jackson, Michigan. We have, Hancock Elementary. Welcome. Crispus Attucks Elementary in Brooklyn, New York. Hello. We're so excited to have you all here today. So many more friends coming into the room. All right. Well, welcome, everyone. My name is Dana Bond, and I'm the Executive Vice President of Strategic Alliances here at First Book. I'm excited to lead you on an adventure into the galaxy far, far away. Since 2000, Disney has been a long-standing supporter of First Book and our network, helping us serve educators and kids alike. That's why it brings me great joy to have you all here with us today. Today marks not only the 1st of October, but also the beginning of Star Wars Reads Month. And I'm looking forward to starting the celebration right here with you and our friends from Disney and Lucasfilm Publishing. But I think I can show you better than I can tell you.
Not ready for what's going down on Ariadu.
It's like not fair to have evil wizards running the galaxy.
The Jedi come into their true power. They are going to be triumphant. And may the Force be with you!
All right, before we begin, we have 3 exciting objectives for our time together today, and I'd like to share them with you. First, you'll have the opportunity to meet some amazing storytellers and even get to ask them some questions. Second, you'll learn more about Star Wars and the bravery of Jedi through a very special read aloud. And finally, we hope to spark your imaginations and inspire you to tell your own story. Now, you'll hear a lot about in the galaxy is the Force. In Star Wars, the Force is the energy field that connects every living thing in the galaxy. I'd like us to prepare by finding the Force within ourselves. If you've ever meditated, it's a lot like that. Now, quiet your mind, feel the Force, and allow it to flow through you. Inhale deeply, drawing in the energy of the galaxy, and exhale. I think we're ready now. And perfect timing, too, because we have a transmission coming from a very special friend of mine.
Hello there. My name is Michael Seguin, and I'm the Creative Director of Publishing for Lucasfilm. Today marks the beginning of a month-long celebration of galactic storytelling known as Star Wars Reads Month. Each October, we hope to share the power of books and stories from around the galaxy with readers of all ages. I'm so excited to help kick off your epic adventure into a galaxy far, far away. Together with First Book, we hope to inspire you, the next generation of storytellers. What's even more special about today's kickoff is that we have teachers and students, Jedi Masters and Younglings, joining us from around the country, or as we like to say, from around the galaxy. Over the next hour, we'll journey into the world of the Jedi Knights and explore what it means to truly be brave. The Star Wars galaxy continues to grow each year, sparked by endless imagination and unforgettable adventures. These adventures feature epic characters that we hope you'll grow to love. One of my favorite ways to enjoy these stories is by reading all of our amazing books and comics and magazines, but especially the book you're going to hear about today. In fact, I can think of no one better to guide you through this incredible journey than Star Wars authors Charles Soule and his daughter Rosemary Soule. With that, I leave you with Charles and Rosemary to begin your Jedi training. Until we meet again, may the Force be with you.
I hope you're excited to explore the galaxy today. Mike's transition made me think of a question I'd like to ask you. So before our journey begins, I'd love to hear from you in the chat. Who's your favorite Star Wars character? Mine, personally, is Yoda. I love Yoda. He's like a teacher. He's very wise and always gives really great advice. Well, let's not delay any further, shall we? It's time to meet the authors who tell the stories of some of our favorite characters. Charles Soule and his daughter Rosemary Soule. Charles, Rosemary, the force is with you.
Thank you so much. It is fantastic to be here. I see that there are over 100 schools in this transmission right now, which means many students. This is amazing. How do you feel, Rosemary?
I'm so excited to be here and so excited to share this really special book with you guys.
Yeah, we both love reading. We both love writing. We'll talk about that in a little bit, and getting a chance to share our love of Star Wars, our love of story, and the book that we wrote together is just really exciting. So I wanted to introduce ourselves very quickly so that you know who we both are. As Dana said, my name is Charles Soule. I am a writer of a lot of different kinds of stories. In Star Wars in particular, I've been writing stories for about 10 years. That includes a lot of different things in comic books, but also adult novels and short stories, and even the kids' book that we're going to be reading to you today. I've written hundreds of stories in Star Wars about all kinds of different characters, from Yoda to Chewbacca to Darth Sidious to you name it, really. And it's been one of the great joys of my career to work in Star Wars. What about you, Rosemary?
Well, so this is actually the first book that I've ever written. I don't have much of a career as an author as of yet, but I'm 18 years old and I wrote this book when I was 16. So a couple years ago, but I'm definitely looking forward to hopefully writing some more in the future and continuing on with this journey of being an author like my dad.
So maybe we'll get to talk about the next story a little bit later. We'll see. But Dana asked a question in the chat to all of the people listening at home, or I guess in school, in the classrooms, about what their favorite Star Wars character is. So I'm going to ask you what yours is, but first I'm going to say that mine is one of the bad guys. I actually really like Emperor Palpatine. I don't know, something about bad guys in stories is always really interesting to me, and he was just like so evil and so like wild and all the stuff that he did. Something about him really interests me, I guess. And the truth is, you can't have a really strong hero unless you have a really strong villain, something for them to sort of fight off and defeat. And so Palpatine is probably my favorite, as crazy as that sounds. What about you, Rosie?
Well, I'd say my favorite Star Wars character is probably Jar Jar Binks, just because I know he's silly, he's goofy, but you know whenever he's on screen, you're going to be laughing, you're going to be having fun, it's going to be a good time. Jar Jar Binks always makes a scene more fun.
You know, they re-released Phantom Menace Episode 1 in theaters a few months ago, and we went and saw it, and you are not kidding. You laughed every time Jar Jar was on screen. So I guess you couldn't have two characters more different than Emperor Palpatine and Jar Jar Binks, but that's part of why Star Wars is so great, is there's really a story and a character for everybody in it. It's pretty fun. So why don't we talk a little about how we came to write this book together and how we got into writing and how you have found writing and reading through your life. I started reading when I was really young. It was something that I always loved to do. I love stories. I've read so many books. It always was something that was just really thrilling to me, whether it was a picture book or a novel or you name it. And so when I got a little bit older, not even that much older, I started exploring the path to writing my own books. And I actually wrote my first book in fourth grade. I saw in the chat that we have a lot of fourth grade classrooms here. Also first grade, kindergarten, fifth, higher. But my first book was in fourth grade. It was called Uni, the Last Unicorn. It was very important to me. It was about a little baby unicorn having an adventure. And it was a kid's picture book like the one that we're going to read later. And I kind of just didn't stop from there. I always was writing stories. It was always kind of both sides of the coin for me. You would read a story and you'd write a story. And eventually I was very fortunate that I was able to start doing it for a career. But it really all started with just the love of it. I love story, whether I'm making it or bringing it in a book, a film, whatever it might be. What about you?
Well, I've always loved to read. Reading has always been a huge part of my life ever since I was really little. My parents would read me books all the time when I was little. I learned to read in kindergarten and haven't stopped since. I've always thought that reading is such an amazing way to escape into a completely new world where anything is possible and your imagination can just run rampant. And with writing, what's so magical and special about writing is you are the one creating those worlds when you're writing, and you can be a part of this beautiful thing that is like the materialization of your imagination. So I've always, reading and writing have both always had a very special place in my heart.
That's fantastic. So we wrote this book together. What is it called? Do you want to tell everybody?
Yes. So it is called Jedi Brave in Every Way.
Yep. And Lucasfilm, actually Mike Siglain, who we saw earlier in the presentation, who is an amazing, he helps get a lot of storytelling done in Star Wars. And he approached me. We've known each other for a long time, and he approached me about writing a kid's picture book. And it was his idea. What if you did this with your daughter? Because he knows you. He's known you for a long time, since you were much littler. And he thought it might be a great idea to bring in the perspective of somebody younger to write a book for kids, which I thought was a brilliant idea. So we got to work and we started putting this project together. And we should probably get into reading it soon, but do you want to speak very briefly about like the process of how we did it and like how we made the book?
Yeah, so I think what was really important with this book, for me at least, when deciding what we wanted it to be about, was I knew that if I had the special opportunity to create something that so many people were going to read and so many people were going to have access to, I wanted it to have a message that was really important and that I could really like stand behind, and that I wish I had when I was younger, and was the kind of thing that when I was in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, I would have wanted to read. And so I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm not going to get too deep into it yet, but the theme of this book is kind of overcoming fears and learning that it's okay to be scared, but you can be brave at the same time. And so that was definitely something that was a really important lesson for me to learn when I was younger. And so I thought writing a book about it and about what are real fears that young kids have, and what are the ways that I was able to get over them when I was your age. How can I share that with people? And that was what was really meaningful for me about writing this book.
I think that's amazing. I also know that we have students listening to us who are a wide range of ages in the presentation today. So there's kindergarten kids I saw, and it looks like there are kids all the way up to 6th or 7th grade. But so there's a wide range of ages here, and the things a kindergartner might find scary aren't necessarily the things that a 6th or 7th grader might find scary. But I think we can all relate to the idea that sometimes the world can be a little intense. And the big message of the book is that even when things get intense, just because you're afraid doesn't mean you can't be brave at the same time and do what you need to do. So with all of that in mind, should we start reading this thing? Should we start reading this book?
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea.
Okay, so why don't I kick things off, and then we'll just hand it off, okay? Okay, so this book is called Jedi Brave in Every Way. It's written by Rosemary Soule and me, Charles Soule, with incredible art by Valerie Valdivia. This is Starlight Beacon. Younglings from all over the galaxy come here to study a mystical power called the Force. With enough training, they can use the Force to help people. They will become Jedi Knights.
This is This is Grand Master Yoda, a very wise Jedi. He enjoys teaching others and understands the path from youngling to Jedi very well. But even for Yoda, sometimes things do not go the way he expects.
When Yoda arrives at the Jedi training room, 3 younglings do not seem to be learning anything at all. Happening, what is? Yoda asks. The training droid, 8D8D, or 8s for short, told Toko, Bree, and John stories about adventures they may have when they become Jedi Knights. But instead of getting excited, they grew afraid.
Yoda says. Overcoming fear is the greatest lesson for a young Jedi to learn. Even I had to learn this lesson. An idea I have, Yoda announces, and he goes to find someone who can help. He comes back with Burryaga. Burry is an older student called a Jedi Padawan, but he remembers that being a youngling was very scary sometimes. He greets the younglings with a big Wookiee roar. Rawr! And then, to make them feel better, he gives them the best medicine in the galaxy.
A Wookiee hug, which does look pretty nice. Yoda thinks it will help the younglings to hear a story from Burryaga about his own fears. Even though Burry is now very big, a long time ago, on a planet far, far away,
He was very small. Buri's people, the Wookiees, come from a planet called Kashyyyk. There, they live in harmony with nature and spend their time in the huge trees that grow all over the planet.
When Buri was younger, the trees of Kashyyyk looked very tall. He was afraid he would fall if he tried to climb one, but life in the trees is an important part of being a Wookiee. Come with me, Buri. Or come with us, Buri, his parents said. We'll do it together. Buri Yaga was afraid, but kept climbing anyway. Eventually...
Buri Yaga made it to the top. A beautiful view of Kashyyyk was waiting for him. He didn't have to be brave enough to climb a whole tree. He just had to be brave enough to take one step, and then another. He just had to keep going. Now, when Buri is scared to do something big, he thinks about it like a lot of small things he can do one after the other.
A natural part of being a person, fear is, Yoda explains. But when fear you feel, a choice you must make. Only afraid are you, or also brave? How can we be both afraid and brave? Bree asks. Worry not, Yoda says. Teach you, I will. Come now, Yoda says. An adventure we will have. Bree roars.
The younglings follow Master Yoda and Buri Yaga to a chamber aboard Starlight Beacon with many beautiful spaceships. Yoda shows them one called a long beam that will take them across the galaxy. Fasten your seatbelts, Eights instructs. Far to travel we have, Yoda says. Many interesting places we will visit. You will confront your fears and learn to be Jedi Brave.
Yoda, Buri, and Toko explore a world called Geonosis, while Eights plays with the other younglings back on the long beam. Geonosis is a planet full of many kinds of insects. I do not like bugs, Toko exclaims. They are strange and scary. I want to go back to the ship, Master Yoda. Strange they are, Yoda agrees. Very different from you and me. But a Jedi Knight must understand and be in harmony with all forms of life.
What if these bugs sting us? Toko asks. Hurt you, they will not, Yoda assures her, if you do not hurt them. Sometimes afraid we are of things we do not understand, Yoda continues. Often, we learn there is nothing to fear. These creatures are an important part of nature. Beautiful and interesting they are.
If only you take the time to look. Toko realizes the insects are fascinating, not scary. They are living creatures, just like her.
Next, Yoda takes John to the water planet Moncala. I can swim, but I'm afraid of the ocean, Master Yoda, John admits. It is very big. I'm so small. Swimming is the same in the smallest pond as in the biggest ocean, Yoda replies. If swim you can, then you can swim anywhere. You must only be brave enough
to try. When John sees the beauty below the ocean's surface, he forgets he is afraid. He discovers that size matters not. No place is too big to explore.
Later, they land on Elfrona, a rocky world where plants cannot grow. Few people live here, Yoda explains. A lonely place this is. I do not like being alone, Bree says. It makes me feel afraid. Even when you are by yourself, alone you are not, Yoda says. Inside us all, a wonderful friend lives. Hard to find when other people are near, but be brave and find this friend you will.
Even though Yoda, Buri, and her friends are close by, Bree thinks they seem very far away. Bree looks for the friend Yoda told her about, but she is all by herself. Then she hears a little voice in her head and realizes she is not alone. She finds
her imagination. Bree thinks of the many wonderful adventures she will have as a Jedi and all the people and creatures she will help. Once she sees what her imagination can do, she decides being alone isn't so lonely after all.
All three younglings feel much better, but it is not yet time to return to Starlight Beacon. One more fear you must face, Yoda tells them. The Jedi's greatest fear it is. Toko, John, and Bree do not know what could be scarier than the things they have already done. To get ready for their final challenge, they share what they have each learned about being brave. The Jedi do not just help other people, they help each other too. They
arrive at their last destination, Utapau. It is a planet full of many deep, dark holes, some so deep you can't see the sun or the moons or the stars at all. I can't see anything. It's so dark. I don't know what's here. Exactly, Yoda says. Afraid you are of the things you know not, because you know not.
Seek the light of understanding. Chase away the dark it will. Always there the light is, Yoda promises. The Jedi carry it with them. In the glow from Master Yoda's lightsaber, the younglings can see so many tunnels. Only one leads back to the long beam, but the younglings do not know which one. All the tunnels are dark, and the younglings are afraid, but they decide to be brave. After what seems like a long time,
they find their way. It is time to go home.
The younglings now know how to overcome their fears. They have learned it is okay to be afraid sometimes. Fear is just a feeling, and it feels even better to be brave. If they ever feel afraid again,
they will be Jedi Brave. For light and life.
Great job, Rosemary. That was really fun. I love reading that story. It makes me happy every time we read it to students, or just when we're remembering what we did. I think it's a really nice thing that we put into the world. So I think we should now maybe open it up to some questions from the students. I'd love to hear what people thought of the book and what they think about their own stories. Dana, do you want to help us with that?
Yes, absolutely. So thanks, Charles and Rosemary. I always love to ask questions after hearing a great story. So I have one for everyone to think about. Jedi Masters, remember to use the chat window, which you guys are already using so amazingly throughout this broadcast. But on the left of your screen, you'll be able to type in the responses for your classroom of younglings. But Charles and Rosemary, I'll start with you while we give our friends time to think about their answers. The story focuses on bravery and how Jedis overcome their fears. Think about a time you were afraid and how you overcame your fears. What helped you be brave?
Is it okay if I go first, Rosemary?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So when I was little, when I was younger than you, much younger than you, when I was a little kid, I had a real fear of the dark. When it came time to go to bed and the lights would go out, I was not excited because I was, what's under the bed? What's, just on the other side of the closet or whatever it might be. And so it took me a long time to just understand that there wasn't going to be anything there in the dark that wasn't there in the light. And the light was always going to come back, and it wasn't really anything to be afraid of. It was the same place, it just looked different. But it took me a long time. There were a lot of nightlight requests, a lot of taking a flashlight with me to bed and hiding it under my pillow, things like that. But eventually, I felt a lot better, and now I'm not so afraid of the dark, which is nice. What about you?
Well, one of the things that I was really scared of for a long time was thunder. And I think what was so scary to me about thunder was I didn't know where it came from. I didn't know what it was, especially when I was younger, and I didn't know any of the science behind thunder or what it is. It was just this really, really loud noise that I never knew when it was coming. It would just crash down, and I didn't know what was going on, and it would really freak me out. But what helped me overcome that fear was actually learning the science behind what thunder is and how it comes from lightning and what lightning is. And there's actually some really, really cool science behind what lightning is and how it works. And lightning's pretty cool. It's pretty beautiful. And so realizing that thunder was just the shock wave that comes from lightning made me actually start to not only not be scared of it anymore, but think it was kind of cool and enjoy thunderstorms, because I knew that a really cool natural phenomenon was happening every time I heard that thunder.
Wow. And we have some fears coming through on the chat. I see petting big dogs, big deep water, spiders, the dark, also heights, fear of trying something new. I think we all can agree. Sometimes that's a little scary. For me, very much like the book, when I was a youngling, I was terrified of bugs. And it didn't matter how big or small, if they were flying or crawling, I was afraid. And one day I had to grow up because I had other little younglings following behind me. and they were scared. And one of us had to be brave. And since I was the older youngling, I started to be brave and show that these bugs were not going to hurt me. But yeah, we all have so many different fears when we're growing up.
Yep. I saw a good one in the chat of someone who was afraid of going too high on the swings. That one made me happy. I've
Yeah.
felt that too. You know, what if you go all the way around? Anyway, so why don't we get into some of the other questions people have, Dana? And I know you can help coordinate that. I'm looking forward to see what people want to know.
Absolutely. So everyone, this time, instead of using the chat box, type your question in the question and answers box. It makes it easier for our author friends to read those. So we have some great questions coming in. Let's see. Can you talk about how your story became an actual book?
Yeah, this is a great question because there's I think a lot of people, whenever they're making a story, whether it's a story for themselves or a story for something as cool as Star Wars, there's a real question mark about how you go from just maybe writing something down on a piece of paper or typing something to it actually being a book that's in a bookstore. And for us, the process was pretty straightforward. I mean, I say that having done it. It probably is a mystery to some of the people listening. But as I mentioned earlier, Mike Siglain from Lucasfilm came to me and said, would you like to write a picture book? And if you did, could you set it in this special era of Star Wars called the High Republic, which was a time when there were Jedi running around all over the place, as you saw in the story, having incredible adventures all around the galaxy. It was a time of great optimism and light and hope, and it was really a beautiful time in the Star Wars world. And I said, that sounds really fun. And he said, well, you know, I also thought, what if you wrote it with your daughter, Rosemary, who, as I said, he knew. And you guys could do it together because Rosemary is a kid, or was more of a kid at the time. And she will be able to sort of understand maybe what kids think about in a way that you don't. And I said, I think that's a really good idea. And so Rosemary and I just started from what's called a blue sky, which is when you have all the ideas in the world and you have no limits on the imagination that you want to put into the story, which is always a really fun place to start. So we started there where we knew we could do anything. And from then, Rosie, where'd we go?
Well, I think one of the things that I don't know if I knew going into this project was how long it takes from a book to get from an idea to an actual finished product. I think it took us about a year and a half from when we first started thinking about doing this project, and then when we actually had the book in our hands. It's a really long process with so many stages and lots of outlining, lots of drafts. So our first draft, I guess, that we worked on was really just figuring out what we wanted to have happen in the story, what the fears we wanted to touch on were going to be, who our characters were going to be, just brainstorming things like that. And then once we had all of those ideas locked down, we started breaking it down just page by page, thinking about what we wanted to happen on each page. We actually had a notebook where we drew little sketches and were kind of storyboarding out what we wanted to happen. And then once we had that, we started working on the dialogue. And then there was a big process of working with the wonderful artist for this book, Valerie Valdivia, working with her to figure out what the images were going to look like, and collaborating on this shared project. And there were so many different people involved that we collaborated with. And it was definitely a process, but a really, really fun one.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's right.
We have a question that follows up to that, actually. What is the best way to collaborate on a project? How did it work with writing this book and having it illustrated?
That is a phenomenal question. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, I also have done a lot of work in comic books. I've written, I think close to 500 comic books with all kinds of characters, Star Wars characters, but also Daredevil and Superman and Batman and Spider-Man. And so those are all collaborations. And so you're not telling the story by yourself. And one of the most important things to remember is that every person who's working on a story has a point of view that can be very valuable and very powerful, especially because it might be different than yours. other people might see some of the story elements in a way that you don't, which is a way for the story to become richer and have more ideas in it and make it possibly appeal to more people. And I think in particular with Jedi Brave, it was really useful because Rosemary, as I've mentioned a couple times, is younger than me. So I was writing the story as a grown-up, but she was writing the story as a person who was younger. So how do you think that added to the story, Rosie? And also, what do you think the illustrator Valerie Valdivia brought to the table?
Well, for the first part of that question about me being like I'm still basically a kid. I know I'm 18, but I'm still feel like a kid. And so I think that definitely contributed to this book because, I mean, I think every single fear that we included in the book was a fear that I had when I was younger. I was really afraid of bugs. I was afraid of the dark. I'm still a little bit afraid of the ocean sometimes. And so I think I just wanted to make this story feel as real as possible. I really wanted to include fears that I think kids really have and that I had, and write the kind of book that would have helped me when I was younger. And by younger, I mean not like less than 10 years ago, like not that long ago. So I think just having those experiences be so recent in my mind was definitely helpful when thinking about the audience for this book and what I wanted it to accomplish and what we wanted to accomplish with it. And then when it comes to working with an illustrator, honestly, that was just one of the most amazing experiences of this entire project, seeing the ideas that we had come to life and this amazing artist, like just bringing our ideas into the real world and putting them on paper was such an amazing experience and so beautiful to watch.
Oh, wow. We have another question, another great one. How did you decide which characters to include in the story? That's a good one.
It is. Well, we both really, really like Yoda, and we knew that this was going to be a story about younglings who were the youngest of the Jedi students, much like a lot of the people listening to the presentation today. I think pretty much everybody here would be a youngling, maybe a few Padawans on the older side, some of these grades. But one of the primary teachers of younglings in the Star Wars universe is Yoda, Master Yoda. And so it was very easy to say, well, this makes a lot of sense for Yoda to be part of the story. And now we get to tell a story in Yoda's interesting way of talking and he's such a fun and cool and wise character. So Yoda was easy. But Yoda's not the only character in the story. So you also have a few others. Rosemary, do you remember how we settled on including some of the other characters you see?
Well, I know one of the other big characters in the story is Buryaga. And the reason we included Buryaga is because Buryaga is one of my favorite characters in the High Republic. And I know that if I was feeling afraid, I would really want a Wookiee hug. I think that would be one of the best things ever. So that was one of the reasons that we included Buryaga. He just seemed like the perfect character for this book. He's so comforting. He's so kind. Just like the perfect person to be there in these kinds of scary times.
And then the three younglings were original. We made those characters up for this book, Bree, John, and Toko, and that was also a really extraordinary experience because we got to add something new to the Star Wars galaxy that wasn't there before, that we made up ourselves. And those characters have shown up in other stories. They've shown up in grown-up books. They've shown up in comics. And other places. And so it's one of the things that's really fun about Star Wars is when you make up something of your own, you never know where it's going to pop up later. So it's all been really fun.
Awesome. All right, I have another good one. How can Jedi Masters help to foster creativity and imagination in our younglings?
Rosemary, I'm going to let you take this one first since I've been answering all these questions first. By Jedi Masters, obviously we're talking about the teachers in the classrooms.
Yes.
You're in school now. I haven't been in school for a long time, but I know you've had a lot of great teachers in your day. What do you think have been successful ways that these teachers have helped you, spark your imagination or think about storytelling or just take your mind to a new place that isn't just in the classroom?
Yeah, well, I think one of the most important things about writing is just to keep doing it. Never ever stop writing. Always be writing. You never know when you're going to have an idea that you can just run with and make something really amazing out of. And so I think the teachers, my English teachers, that really helped me the most were the teachers that just made me feel totally safe to write whatever I wanted and to write all the time and to write as much as I wanted, and made me feel valid in what I was doing. And even if I was, I don't know, maybe I was just messing around and I was just doodling or writing short stories or something that wasn't necessarily for a school project, they would still encourage me and they would still look at my work and give me feedback and things like that. So I think encouraging students to be writing outside of the classroom, to be writing maybe even outside of whatever the project is that the class is working on, to just be writing as much as possible and to really love writing and not see it as a chore or a task or something you only do in school, but something that can be a really fun pastime that you love to do.
Another question. Do you research Star Wars canon before writing a book so the details align with the Star Wars universe?
I'm going to take this one, Rosemary, because I tell all kinds of stories in Star Wars, and this is a question that I get all the time, because Star Wars has many, 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 many stories in it. You have all the movies, you have the TV shows, you have the books, you have the comics, you have all kinds of stuff. And all of those stories are meant to be one big story. You can think of it like history, where this happened on this day and then this happened on that day, and all those things follow each other and make the big long river of Star Wars history throughout the galaxy, which is thousands of years old at this point in the storytelling. So that's a lot to remember. It's a lot to know. And the way that I approach it is by, you could call it homework. I don't really think it's homework to watch a Star Wars movie at home, but definitely I watch the movies a lot. I read everything that comes out. I am friendly, fortunately, with a lot of other people who make Star Wars. And so I'm always able to reach out to them and say, what did you do with Darth Vader in this story? I'm doing something that might connect with it. I'd love to talk it through. But there's also a group at Lucasfilm, which is called Story Group. And their job is to make sure that the creators, whether it's artists or writers or directors or actors, are doing things that feel consistent with the larger Star Wars galaxy. So they're an incredibly powerful resource for us to be able to use. You can just think of them like these, there's, 10 or so of them. And their job is to make sure that we get it right, that we don't make a mistake, that, how Darth Vader has that thing on his chest with all those little buttons on it. They know exactly what those buttons are and where they go and what they do and what color they are. And so if you mess one up, they'll let you know, which is great because I don't want to make any mistakes. I want to get it all right.
That's great. And goes back to that collaboration again.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us about the illustrator and what her process was when she was creating the images for the book?
Yeah. It's a multi-tiered process. So as Rosemary mentioned earlier, the way that it starts is by us coming up with a script almost. You can think of it almost like a movie script where it's like on page 1, these things happen and we think these images would work with that. And then page 2, it's these things happen. We think this would work. Pages 3 and 4 are a big, huge image that goes across the page that has these words on it. And so Valerie would send what are called roughs or sketches. And so those are images that are usually drawn in pencil, and they're very loose, and they're not very detailed, but they give you the idea of what she was thinking about how to implement the ideas that we had asked for in the script. And from there, do you remember what happened after we got the roughs in, Rosemary?
Well, there was a lot of back and forth of going and making little tiny adjustments and making sure that we settled on the image that was exactly what we had in both of our minds. And it was definitely a collaboration between Valerie's amazing imagination and creativity, and then what we thought the story was going to look like.
Yeah, and eventually once that was sort of locked, we got to see the next level, which were color roughs, which were more detailed. And then it became down to like little teeny tiny things like, well, what if Bree's lightsaber was green instead of blue? Or Buryaga, his fur could be a little bit more golden, or just little tweaks like that. And eventually it ended up in the final form that you see in the book. And we could not be happier with it. It is really a beautiful, beautiful book. The illustrations are perfect.
It was amazing to see all the beautiful colors and images come together. I agree. What do you do? This is a good one. What do you do if you get stuck while writing and can't figure out what to say next?
This is called writer's block. It's a very famous term that every writer has heard about and knows about. And Rosemary, do you mind if I take this one first, and then because I've encountered writer's block maybe a little bit more than you have in my career so far. Writer's block can be a real thing, but really, what I think writer's block is being tired. I think that our brains are kind of like batteries, and putting ideas out from them draws that battery down. It's just like your phone, maybe, for those people on this call who have a phone. And so there's a certain point when really you pulled so many ideas out of your brain that it doesn't have any juice left, and it really needs to recharge, just like a battery needs to recharge. So what I usually do is just say, okay, trying to keep hammering away at this story when clearly I'm too tired, my brain is too tired to do it, isn't going to generate any results. And the way that you recharge your battery, your mental battery, is by not doing the work for a little while, letting your subconscious think about the problem in the background of your mind while you are thinking about other things instead. And so for me, something that really helps a lot is shifting gears to work on another story that I might be working on, something else, some other creative project. Playing music. I love to play guitar and sing, and so I'll play music a lot. That helps to recharge my battery. Or inspiring myself with some other form of creativity, like going to see a movie, reading a book that I like, watching a TV show, even playing a video game. All of those things can help let my mind recharge its battery so that when I come back to the story, I have all these new ideas I wasn't even expecting I was going to have. So that's what I do. Rosemary, have you experienced writer's block in any of your work that you've done? Or
I definitely have experienced writer's block, whether it's writing a fiction story, like a creative story, or even just an essay for school. I definitely have experienced writer's block a lot. And one of the things that helps me the most, you touched on this a little bit at the very end of what you were saying, but I think kind of consuming other forms of writing and creativity and media really helps generate ideas for me. So whether that's watching a movie, reading a book, listening to music, a podcast, like reading a news article, or even going to an art museum or anything like that can really get ideas flowing for me and just tingle different parts of your brain that might not have been working otherwise. So that's definitely a big thing for me, is trying to spark that creativity in other ways and almost like jumpstart my brain's battery.
Such a great analogy with the recharging batteries and, just taking a break. I love that. Okay, we have the last question here. How do you become a Jedi in your own life? I love that.
That is a great question. I bet Rosemary and I will have slightly different answers to this one, because I think being a Jedi means different things to us. And part of it is that I'm a little bit older than Rosemary is. And so my version of how you do that is probably a little different than hers. But for me, when I think of what being a Jedi is in the real world, in this world that we live in, not in the Star Wars galaxy, right? I don't have a lightsaber. I can't use the Force. But the thing that I think I have in common with Jedi is the idea of growing and studying and learning so that you're always becoming somebody who knows more and is wiser and is more thoughtful and understands more about the world and how all its people and how all its creatures and all of its ideas and things connect with each other. And that helps you learn how to be a better person in that world by understanding how the things that you do affect everyone else in it. And that's what I think being a Jedi is in this world, is just being a good person and understanding how your actions affect others. And how you get there is really just by like it's all the stuff we've been talking about. It's reading, it's being thoughtful, it's talking to people that you respect and asking them how they live their lives and asking them for help, realizing that you're never alone. The Jedi are never by themselves. And using all of the resources around you, the Jedi masters in your own life, whether it's your teachers or your family or your friends, to help connect with them and understand that their experiences can make your experience richer, and you can be a wiser, more thoughtful person in your life. So I guess if I had to sum it up in one word, it would be connection. I look for connections with the people that I care about and see what they have to teach me. Rosie, what about you?
Well, for me, I think the most important part of being a Jedi to me is helping people and kind of putting the kindness out into the world that you would want back for you. Like, I think that to me, the Force really is kindness, and it's all the kindness that kind of circulates and that people give to each other. And so the way that I try to practice that in my own life is making sure I'm there for my friends when they meet a friend. I'm doing small little acts of kindness for the people that I interact with, and just making sure that I'm putting as much good energy into the world as I can, and putting as little bad energy into the world as I possibly can. So even just the tiniest little acts of kindness can really make you feel so much happier and make everyone around you feel so much happier. And I think that's the biggest thing, is just making sure you're looking out for the people in your life and trying to just put as much kindness into the world as possible.
I love that. Those are some really great questions coming from all the classrooms across the galaxy, and some great answers too. I believe Charles and Rosemary, you have one final question for our younglings?
We do. So it's our understanding that the people listening to this presentation have gotten an activity pack that is going to inspire you guys to write your own stories and tell your own stories. And even if you don't do it through that packet, I am curious. I would like to ask everybody to think about a story that they might tell if they found this presentation inspiring, or even if you haven't, think about the story that you might tell, and then what would it be called and what would it be about? And that's I think a really interesting thing that everybody hopefully can spend a little time thinking about. So you know what? Actually, Rosemary, do we have our next story that we could talk about?
We do. We actually have another story coming out. It's called 3 Younglings and the Snack Frog of Doom. And it's a little different from this book that we just read to you guys, because it's not a picture book. It's actually a graphic novel. So I'll let you, Dad, talk a little bit about what the differences are and how we started writing this.
Sure. So Jedi Brave in every way went very well. We had a great time doing it, and fortunately Lucasfilm seemed to like the way that we collaborated on stories, so they asked us to tell another one, which is great. 3 Younglings and the Snack Frog of Doom stars the 3 younglings that we met in the story that we read to you, but this is in a graphic novel format, as Rosemary mentioned. So it reads like a comic book. If you've ever seen a Batman or a Star Wars comic or anything like that, a Spider-Man, it's just like that. So a page with panels and word balloons and beautiful art showing the characters having an incredible adventure. And in this particular story, those 3 kids that we met, Bree, John, and Toko, go to the movies, go to the Star Wars equivalent of the movies, which is a holo film. And they have a big adventure that is kicked off directly from that experience, going to see a movie. So it was very fun to be able to figure out what going to the movies would be like in the Star Wars world. And it was amazing to be able to work with Rosemary again on another story. And I hope this isn't the last time we do it. One of the things that's really fun about Star Wars is that there are so many different ways to tell stories. You can make movies, you can make video games, you can tell comic book stories, you can tell picture book stories, you can write novels. Star Wars has so many different ways of telling stories, and I'm so fortunate that I and Rosemary get to be part of several of those different paths. So I am so grateful that we got to do this today. I am hugely grateful to First Book, to Lucasfilm, to Disney, to Mike Siglain, to Rosemary for taking time out of her busy school day to be here, and all of the students and all of the teachers who took time out of their days to be with us. So I think maybe we can come up with a last few pieces of advice for the students, right? The last few things we might have to share. So if you had one other piece of advice, Rosemary, for the students who are going to be starting to write their own stories in their activity packets and so on, or just as they move on in their journeys to write the stories of their own, what advice would you have to give them?
I think my biggest piece of advice is, if you want to be a great writer, you have to be a great reader. And there are so, if you want to be intelligent, thoughtful person in the world who is thinking critically and has interesting things to say, you have to be reading. I think reading is one of the most important things to be doing. So just read as much as you can, whenever you can. Really hone love of reading. That is one of the most valuable skills you can have for it. I mean, it's just a really enjoyable activity a lot of the time, but also it will really serve you well as you grow up, as you move forward in school, as you become an adult who's living in the world and has a career. Reading will never, ever, ever serve you wrong.
That's fantastic. I agree with that completely. I love reading books. I read all the time. But the piece of advice I would have for somebody who's thinking about writing a story, and this is true for students, for younger people, also true for grown-ups, is to think about the thing about the story that is also about you. And because a good story, in my mind, is something that is personal to you, even if it's not directly personal on the page. And you can see, for example, with Jedi Brave, that Rosemary and I told a story about kids being afraid, which is something that neither one of us is afraid in exactly that way anymore, but we both remember it as part of our own experience. So we tried to put that on the page and tried to capture what it feels like for a little kid, a small child, to be afraid of things. And whenever I tell a story now, I connect it to something that is from my own life and my own experience and something I believe or care about. For example, in the Three Younglings and the Snag Frog of Doom story, the comic story that we just mentioned, I really love going to the movies. And so I was able to sort of think about what it's like to go to the movies and what it's like to go to the movies as a kid and how excited you feel and how anything can happen in the movie theater, even if it's something wild. So I think the advice is, think about the stories that you have to tell that are about you, and find ways to put that information, your own experience, into the stories you tell. It will make them better, it will make them stronger, and you will like them more when you're done. So I think this has been phenomenal. I think it's probably time to wrap up, but I think before we go, we do have one more transmission, don't we?
Thank you, Charles and Rosemary, for sharing your incredible book and your incredible journey with all of our younglings. And thank you, everyone, for joining today's epic adventure into a galaxy far, far away. But before we end your Jedi training, we have one last surprise for you. Your reading adventure doesn't end here. Each educator who attended the live session will receive a gift certificate for the First Book Marketplace to purchase books and more for your class. So keep an eye out for a transmission or an email with more details. Now, younglings, as you continue your Jedi training, remember that you are the leaders of tomorrow. You are the next generation of storytellers and innovators. And we hope that today's adventure sparks your imagination and inspires you to keep reading books and inspires you to create your own stories. We encourage you to be Jedi Brave in your own way. Thank you for listening, and remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Wow. I also want to give a special thanks to our friends at Disney and Lucasfilm Publishing for today's Out of This World experience. And thank you to all who joined us across the galaxy. Remember, Star Wars Reads Month has just begun, and more great adventures await you in the stories you will read and share. Jedi Masters, make sure to visit the First Book Marketplace for more great ways to celebrate the month with your younglings. Now, we can't say goodbye just yet without making sure we connect with the Force one last time. I hope you all remember how we did it the first time. Quiet your mind, feel the Force, and allow it to flow through you. Inhale deeply, drawing in the energy of the galaxy, and exhale. Thank you again, everyone, for joining, and may the Force be with you always.